And welcome to the first installment of STU and the Gasholes. I'm your number 2 Gashole, Chad Kuvo. Joe is the other Gashole.
I guess that makes me the second.
I couldn't go for very long. I ran out of breath.
Yeah, so I guess Joe's threat, Gasshole number 2. It's really
number 1. I gave myself number 2.
We're gonna 1. Sorry, we're gonna struggle with that. Obviously, you guys have probably seen our faces before on a little show called Connections for Life. The show is slightly more popular than Jim and James. Just kidding, boys. We love you. And then of course our fearless leader here, Mr. Stuart Salters. Stu, want to introduce yourself?
Yes, somehow I got to be a part of this this show. I don't know if all of this was my idea, but maybe I was the one that said, "Hey, let's do a webcast." But no. So glad to be here, Stuart Salters. Hopefully, I can guide this conversation a little bit.
Somebody needs to.
So, what are we going to be talking about?
So I just really quick, I want to just talk about kind of what the baseline of the podcast is, just to give people some idea. So webcast, podcast, whatever you want to call it. Obviously, this is going to be dedicated to just exploring energy sources and the role in society. Obviously, I think we're going to want to talk weekly about, or not weekly, I think we said monthly, right? About just kind of the world of energy. Episodes basically to emphasize the pivotal role in natural gas in today's energy landscape, as well as just some discussions with people on alternate energy sources, how it impacts the energy consciousness of America, and obviously, the world, truthfully. Introductions to natural gas and highlighting clean burning properties, versatility, widespread use, empowering everyone's, lives, and obviously bringing in people that give us a more detailed explanation of natural gas, providing a good foundation and understanding for the significance and history of natural gas in the industry. Also touching on the global energy transition, the role of natural gas, and highlighting how educating folks is kind of benefit the seamless transition to cleaner and obviously more sustainable energy sources. So interviewing experts, educators, students who have been positively impacted by natural gas industry, involvement in their education, their stories, and maybe adding some depth to the webcast. Obviously, jokingly, we named it Stu and the Gasholes because we thought it was funny and a little catchy, but I think on a more serious note, it's just to serve as a guide to understanding synergy between natural gas, global energy sustainability, and demonstrating how energy source not only powers our world, but also powers the minds of those who will shape the future. I think we all carve out a little small section of the industry and our time in it, and trying to leave a good foundation for folks that will be coming along in the future is kind of what we're trying to accomplish. So with that being said, I hope I captured at least some of it. Do you
have cue cards over there? Like, how did you get through all that?
No.
I thought like Callie was behind your computer going.
No, I just have I had written some notes, so I'm not gonna lie, I didn't come off with all that on top of my head, but I know, Stu, I just wanted to dig into kind of the purpose of the podcast and or webcast. I'm gonna call it a podcast for the history of time, so I apologize for that, but obviously with your position and what you do and the people that you interface with, I think there's a lot of messaging and a lot of things that are happening down in your part of the world that maybe just the lines sometimes get blurred. And I think the information necessarily isn't conveyed properly to folks. So this is kind of your time to shine, buddy. We're just the Gasholes. So you're the
no pressure.
You're the main squeeze, the main cheese over here, buddy.
Main squeeze.
Yeah.
I know you mentioned that there were some things that had kind of been happening in the course of the last couple of weeks, and maybe touch on those and we'll kind of see where it brings us from there.
Yeah, and before I get there, I mean, two things I want to point out that you said there, Joe, is this is purely educational, right? We want to get facts out there for folks in our industry and outside of our industry to just be aware. And what's happening in DC, I think I can bring that perspective, but excited to be a part of this with y'all because you're in Ohio, Chad, you're in New York, Joe. You're talking with people that work in this industry. You got friends, neighbors in Ohio, New York that are paying their utility bills. So they're obviously impacted by what policy is doing. And so excited just to be a part of a conversation and hopefully have others interact with us as they watch this, just to help people understand what is happening. And by all means, we're not picking winners and losers.
Sure.
Like you said, Joe, we want to open up to anybody that is willing to have the conversation with us, just
We
to
need all
talk
the
about
energy
energy
sources.
policy. Mm-hmm.
We need them all. That's just
Yeah.
the truth of it. Hand in
Yeah.
hand.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. We spend a lot of time really in our corner,
Mhm.
and promoting our corner. And while I think that's an an admirable task, I think it's really essential to natural gas. I also think it's really important to understand all energy sources from a factual standpoint, not just we're better because, or you're not as good because. I don't really think that that's the goal of this webcast, is to really I think over time start bringing in folks and talking to people that sit in different segments of energy sectors, to understand why their positions are what they are, what advancements and what things they're doing. At the end of the day, energy is absolutely crucial for the survival of humanity, right? I don't think anybody will argue that. And um, the best, cheapest, most sustainable, and kind of best energy sources for the planet are what everybody wants. And I think sometimes that gets misconstrued, and you kind of end up in your green, clean energy and your disgusting fossil fuels, right? And kind of those are the positions that people take. And I know, Stu, you being down in DC, you probably see a lot more of that let's say political lobbying, right? From trying to position yourselves on one side or the other. And the goal here would be just to kind of give everybody the opportunity to understand a bit of everything, so they can make the best decisions for their lives, for their families, for their future generations. And we can have that sustainable energy that we've enjoyed all of our lives to continue on for several more generations, hopefully, several more generations. But I know you had mentioned coming into this that there was just a couple of things that kind of like news updates or things that
Yeah.
you've been on down there. So if you want to become this, put your smart hat on and tell the two Gasholes why what's going on, and we can ask really ridiculous questions. So
Yeah. Yeah, no, happy to do it. And always, as we have these conversations, happy to bring a little bit perspective of what's happening, at least on the policy front, and have you guys ask me the hard questions. I think at the outset, just to say, energy is a very popular topic. Energy policy is a very popular topic. I don't see that going away. And so just recently, last week even, the trade association I work for, the American Public Gas Association, had one of our members testify before the House Energy and Commerce Committee. So it's not a court, it's not a part of the judicial system, but that's kind of the best way to explain it, I guess, to folks is, just like you would get a subpoena to appear before a judge, you get requested to testify before a House committee or a Senate committee. And so,
can I stop you right there just
yeah.
for a second? For those of the folks that are listening that don't understand, like me, what is the purpose of doing that? Like, why do you go in front of a House Select Committee or a Senate? Like, why do you do that? What is the goal? To have that conversation or have that
how do you get invited, or why would you get invited is probably the
also a good question. Yeah.
Yeah. So there is a variety of reasons, and unfortunately, I think some of the reasons are skewed from maybe what the founding fathers wanted the reasons to be. But at its core, the members of Congress, whether senators or representatives, are looking for information. And so the only way they get that information, because that's 90% of them probably are lawyers, they're not people in the industry, is to ask people to come tell them. So you can do that in a more informal setting of just meeting with them in their office, meeting with their staffers or them individually, or you can testify before a committee. And the committees are there's a subject matter that the committees are focused on. So energy and commerce, obviously energy and
Sure.
commerce,
Real quick,
being
I
a whole
assume
bunch of
that's
stuff.
both Democrat. It's both sides of the
Yep.
both parties
Yep.
essentially.
Yeah. So
Okay.
the committees are
All right.
made up of Democrats and Republicans. Whatever party is in the majority may have more members on the committee. They'll have the leadership of the committee. So the majority party will have the chair. The minority party will be the ranking member. But you testifying, you're going to get questions from both Republicans and Democrats. And so yeah, I mean, it's really just to gather information. The hearing
So
last week. Oh, go ahead.
well, I just have one more question for you, just about how you get there. So, like, if you and I went in to see one of the congressmen or whomever, essentially we would discuss a lot of topics with them. Somebody's an expert. Then they go, "Hey, will you come to my committee and testify to share your knowledge?" Essentially, is what it sounds like, right?
Yeah, I
It
mean, in
sounds
a
like it's
roundabout
bad.
way.
You get subpoenaed somewhere. That's the only reason.
Yeah, maybe I shouldn't have used that analogy. I don't know if that's the
Every
you're
time
not
I
go.
get subpoenaed, Stu, it's not an exciting event.
I don't get to talk about anything.
It's pretty stressful, to be honest with you.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I just wanted to make sure that I got it right. That's how people get there, essentially.
I mean, it could be bad, right? I mean, if you think about, and that's where I think maybe we've kind of veered away from maybe the intent of this process was just because you could get, the majority party, if it's different than the presidential's party, the majority party in Congress, they might look at it as like a gotcha moment for
That's
someone
what
in
I
the
was gonna say.
administration.
Yeah, it's like they're there to prove
Yeah.
their point, not to listen to yours necessarily. Yeah, because I've seen some obviously that just. I mean, I'll be honest with you, and I don't want to get too far off kilter here because I want you to talk about what was discussed, but it's crazy to me when I watch some of these how badly it's devolved. Like it's turned into like this kind of kangaroo court of just like
Mhm.
chaos that doesn't seem to accomplish very much except give the people that sit on the committee they're kind of like bullies, right? They like bully people, and it kind of freaks me out because I don't feel like they're listening. They're just more interested in getting, like you said, that gotcha moment. Like we caught you. I sometimes wonder why anybody would go on that or go in
Right.
front of one of those, to be honest with you. But anyways, I don't want to derail us of what you were talking about. So you'd mentioned that last week somebody had gone on from APJ.
Yeah, and I think just to highlight some of the policies that that we are concerned about and that were talked about, and maybe to get the conversation going a little bit more with y'all is a couple weeks ago, the Department of Energy put out a rule that basically said federal buildings can't use on site, they can't use fossil fuels. So for us, the folks that I work with, natural gas cannot be used on site. So you couldn't use it in like a furnace, you couldn't use it in a water heater. I'm sure federal buildings cook somewhere in the US, and so you can't use it to cook, just as, examples to think about. And so that was one of the things we really wanted to highlight before these congressional members was,
It's a little
my
unreal.
my opinion, yeah, very unrealistic. I think you guys would agree, but
Meanwhile, most of the electricity is being manufactured by natural gas, probably
Did
off the outside of there.
Stuart, did they give like a time period? Because obviously I'm assuming many like
Can't just
structures
shut
or
it
building
off, right?
places are, I mean, they say by this date, or was this kind of like a
yeah, y'all will have to fact check me, but I'm pretty sure the date was 2030, which is still a little insane in my opinion. And I will say, I mean, it's only new buildings, it's only major renovations, and so if your post office isn't doing anything before 2030, like it doesn't have to rip out its gas system, but if the post office in wherever you are, Chad, Columbus, or whatever
Yeah. What a
suburb you're in.
monumental amount of money to spend
can
to
I,
be
can
less
I ask
efficient.
can I ask another question?
No.
Why? No, seriously, why?
Yeah,
Like
why?
what is the reasoning behind that other than to take a position? I mean, it's not, I think we've demonstrated over time that, I think the amount of like, let's just say residential gas that contributes to greenhouse gas is like 4% of the actual, what's going into the atmosphere. Like by taking a handful of buildings, I mean, clearly it's more than a handful, but what is the intended impact by doing that? I don't really get it. It seems to be a very small percentage of a very small amount of people utilizing natural gas, and I don't see how that has any impact other than a financial impact on federal facilities, which I assume would be retrofitted or changed or using taxpayer funds. I don't understand what the cost benefit is of that. I don't understand.
Yeah, I mean, the cynical answer is it's all politics, right? I mean, you've got a president
Literally.
running for a president running for election, but I mean, the not pragmatic, because the policy, in my opinion, is not pragmatic, but I mean, the hope is that it does decrease greenhouse gas emissions for our country. But you hit the nail on the head. I mean, 40% of electricity is generated by natural gas right now. So you're just moving the emissions from, and we would argue, I would argue, that the direct use of natural gas is better for the
Far more
environment.
efficient.
Right, and it's more efficient, and that's frankly what the APGA's member testified on the Hill about last week was you're just shifting the emissions, right? And you're shifting the emissions in the most inefficient way possible. We can get into that, and I'd love to have somebody come on the show to talk about, you know, power generation technology. There are new things that are happening with combined cycle that make them more efficient, but even it's just physics, right? You're taking a molecule, converting it, and each time you convert it, you lose potential energy.
Yeah.
Not to
I
talk
think
about
I
most
think it's something
electricity
like,
loses 30%. Sorry, Joe. Most electricity loses 30% after generation by the time it gets to its actual use. I mean, on top of
yeah,
that.
and I think
It's crazy.
natural gas from cradle to grave, let's say, is like 97% or so, it's 96% efficient or something like that. I mean, don't fact check me on that, but I know I'm close. Um,
Yeah.
I think the thing that you said, is it's we have lost sight of the ultimate goal, and we are more concerned about the political. That's a new one. Write that one down. Political impact to people's campaigns or their ability to stay in office. So I feel like it's more just pandering to say, look what we did. When I think anybody that would be completely, intellectually honest with themselves would be like, look, we're really not doing anything. We're just trying to save face a little bit for an upcoming election. And and I think, both parties do that. I'm not singling
Right.
out one. It just
Mhm.
happens to be one that's kind of more this way versus the other. And I think that's kind of where we've lost focus as a country,
Mhm.
is that we're just more concerned about how things look versus how they impact, the country or Americans. It's kind of it's bizarre. I don't think everybody fully understands that all the time. The news media does a good job of kind of like creating a message and kind of moving things around so people get to see what they want to see. That's part of the reason that we wanted to do this podcast, honestly, is to be able to talk more like factually and just give people I know it sounds really kind of silly, but when we did Connections for Life and we had like Zach Bertani on and you, to hear about what happens down in government is in the reality of it is far different than I think what most people think it is. And that's why I do want to spend a lot of time talking about some of the things that you guys are working on, because not only do I think it's good to talk about, energy and the education of it, but also to get a perspective as to, um, the reasons why things happen, the reasons that
Mhm.
people are doing things. And, you know, to be honest, I think sometimes we forget how powerful our votes are. And we tend to lean into this messaging a little bit more than we should, than really understanding the facts. So I'm hoping that maybe somebody can get some perspective out of this. I will say to anyone that's watching this, if you have any questions, put them in the box below. We're happy to answer them. Send us an email. We're happy to answer them. Stuart will answer them because his name on the front of
We
the
don't mind
logo.
passing along questions though.
Yeah,
It's
we'll
easy.
just forward them to Stuart. But again, I apologize for derailing it. I have an act of doing that, But um, back to the hearing, Stuart. If you want to kind of talk a little bit more
Well,
about what we discussed, the conclusions, things like that.
I can derail us more. I didn't realize my gym clothes were still in my background, so sorry. I
That's all
rode my
right.
bike
We
rode my
just
bike to
noticed.
work today. So although it was a cool day, I don't
Hey,
know what
hey,
the
that's
temperatures
that's
are.
clean energy, buddy. Like
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
That's being green.
doing my part, doing my part. Now the one thing I'll say, and then we can jump to whatever you guys want to talk about, but I'll say this. Just the challenging part, and you said it, Joe, is we've shifted the discussion from the focus, right? I think all of us on this call or on this webcast and APGA's members, guys y'all work with, we want to decrease emissions, right? We want to make the environment and the air cleaner.
But we have. That's the thing that
Right.
gets lost. You know, over the last like 30 years, we've
Mhm.
drastically reduced it. But no, there's no credit for that.
Right.
You know, I mean, we've reduced it from coal burning and oil burning. Like natural gas has been the transition energy to be able to really reduce emissions over the course of the last, say, 30 or 40 years.
Yep.
And it's
Where it
still
gets
kind
confusing
of
for me, Joe, is where you always talk about, when we were kids, they wanted us to plant trees. And now nobody
yeah.
talks about trees at all. It's
Mhm.
Well, I
literally
mean, I just had, again, stupid analogy, but I live in New York, as Stuart had pointed out, and for my entire like upbringing living in New York, we weren't to use paper bags, we were to use plastic bags, we were killing too many trees. And now all of a sudden we can't use plastic bags, we only can use paper bags because the plastic's bad. And it's like, it's this weird balancing act, like what the message you're getting, for 20 years, like paper bags bad, killing trees bad. And now it's plastic bags bad, paper bags good. It's just, and it's the same thing with energy to a much larger extent. It's the kind of the same thing. 30 years ago, natural gas was the best thing that could ever been created, and now it's the pariah again. So, anyways, again, Chad and I will derail you 1,000 times.
Yeah.
No,
100%.
you're good. You're good. I'm here. I'm here to guide us back. But
Thank you.
I think that's the thing, right? Is you can't have, and I mean, again, we live in a country that's always talking about poles, right? We're
Yeah.
very polarized, which maybe we'll get somebody that can figure that problem out for us. But anyway, but I mean, you can't say yes to only one option, right? You got to say yes to all. And so when you think about this banning of on-site use of fossil fuels in federal buildings, what does that hold? What does that mean for innovation? So
Right.
now you can't have gas heat pumps, which are a cool technology that we could have somebody come talk about, what the folks listening about. We could have renewable natural gas. That all goes away if now, whenever this new federal building renovates and they take out all their combustion equipment, right? You don't get the benefits of renewable natural gas. You don't get the benefits of gas heat pumps. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say hydrogen is going to be used in everybody's homes, but who knows, right? There's smarter people than all of us out there that can figure that out. But if you start taking away all this combustion equipment from these federal buildings, any use of a molecule in a federal building is no longer a possibility. And it's just short-sighted. And it goes back to your paper versus plastic analogy. Like, why can't you have both?
Right. I think the key to energy sustainability is to have choice. And I don't think anybody likes when they're told that they can't have a choice. And I don't begrudge anybody that wants to put 1,000 solar panels in their backyard and they want to have a windmill and that's how they want it. That's fantastic. If you have let's be honest, the means to be able to even construct that at your home to be able to become sustainable. But the vast majority of Americans, not just Americans, but people in the world, don't have access to those resources. And to try to make it an all or nothing approach seems very, very short-sighted. And I think that's where the frustrations sometimes come into play because, no one likes to be told what to do and everybody hates change. So when you get a situation where you're being told that you have to change and that you don't have choices any longer, I think it makes people a bit uncomfortable. And to be frankly honest with you, and I don't mean to be grim, but if we decided tomorrow that we were going to turn off all the natural gas in the country, people would die.
Yeah.
Like,
It's life-sustaining
I mean,
energy, essentially.
it's crazy to think of it that way. I mean, I was listening to something the other day. I think it was probably Joe Rogan. But he had made mention of like there's not even enough electricity producing like greenhouse technology to like power Tesla's like buildings. Like to think about that, like the amount of
He has his
energy,
own nuclear plant with one of
the
his
amount of
buildings.
energy that's required for them to be able to even produce green cars or electric cars is not even, there's not even enough to power the factory, let alone the product that it's creating. So, I may be a little off on that, Paquito, but I think it's, I think that little smelling Spanish, I know. But again, I don't want to get into this like negative conversation. I really want everybody to, and maybe it's a kind of pie in the sky vision, but I think the best place to be would have people that stand on every side of every part of the energy industry, all saying, let's do this together, instead of trying to capitalize off of doing it alone. The right reason is to create sustainable energy so people have everything that they need to survive. It's not to capitalize off of or win an argument. And sometimes I think that
Mhm.
gets really, those lines get extremely blurred.
Right.
You know, you'd mentioned something prior to this, prior to us getting on here, and I don't want to get too long-winded with this, but you'd mentioned something about the stoves. Did you want to maybe just touch on that a little bit and a little update about that?
We're about a half
Yeah.
hour too, so I just
Or
wanted
about half?
to
Okay,
keep you
so we'll
there.
close pretty soon. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think just with regards to the stoves, I mean, this is just something you want to, just to talk about the impacts, or just to highlight the impacts of when people do speak up, it does affect policy, because initially the president's administration had proposed to basically I don't know, not outlaw is probably not the right word, but basically make it illegal for manufacturers to make about 90%, continue to make 90% of the gas stoves that are on the market now. As you can imagine, a lot of home chefs out there, threw up their arms and were like, what the heck? Like, that's not going to fly. And so the administration redid the policy and they proposed it to where 96%, over 90% of gas cooktops, gas ranges are still going to remain on the market. And so manufacturers can continue to make them because that's what people want. That's what people like to use. And I mean, and to the point earlier, we're taking our eye off the target here, because how many emissions are there really from turning on your gas range to cook your eggs every morning or boil your water for your tea or whatever it may be? I mean, there's not a lot of emissions from that appliance.
I
And
had
so why
more
the
hooking
heck?
up my propane grill yesterday, badly.
Well,
Right.
well, I mean, I think it's an interesting point because I sometimes wonder if it's about health and safety or it's about environmental impact. I don't know really what it's about, and I feel like depending on which um topic they're discussing, it kind of gets one or the other, right? But again, I don't mean to go down a deep rabbit hole here, but it's okay to sell really bad things to eat, to subsidize, to make, you know, crappy food and bad ingredients and things that are cancer causing products. I just saw this thing the other day that there's 4 times the amount of the amount of arsenic in a can of like Monster energy drink and Celsius energy drinks than should be ingested. But all of that is okay. But turning on your gas stove and letting a burp of methane go into the air is somehow catastrophic. It's a weird position to take when we care a lot about this, but not so much about this, right? And so I don't know, is it about health and safety? Is it about clean energy? What is it about? Or is it just pandering to be able to secure and harness votes? And I think sometimes that's all it boils down to. And I don't know, it's frustrating, for somebody that sits clearly more on the conservative approach of the world. Like I just feel like we get fed a lot of
There's not a lot
BS.
of common sense used there. Like,
Right, we get fed a lot of
Mhm.
BS that people just continue to, back to the education piece where we originally started with this. Like, you're not getting a full education on anything. You're only getting, like, it's like listening to a couple fight. There's his side, her side, and the truth is somewhere in the middle, and that's the part you never get to hear. It's always one side or the other. So, I think the goal here is to have a conversation with some other people and bring some guests on to really start to peel back the onion to get that middle truth position, and not necessarily be so highly focused on the fossil fuel side or the clean energy side, but like
Mhm.
what's the real truth that's somewhere sandwiched in the middle of that doesn't gain any press and doesn't get any conversation going. And I think I said that in the beginning of the webcast here, but I think that's the goal. So if anybody's made it this long, that's what we're really trying to do is to find that middle ground of
try and
truth.
take this and put it at the beginning for you.
Yeah, well, if we could just cut out like the first, the last 25 minutes, that would be great. But
Well,
you know,
and I think so, Joe, even more than that is just like, you decide, right? I mean, I tell my kids, my kids are young, but I want my kids to think for themselves. I don't
Right.
want, they got to take in what Senator Ted Cruz says. They got to take in what Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez says. But once you put it in your head, you decide. Here we are. We're just laying it out in front of you. Y'all do what you
And I
will
think
with it.
that's where it gets lost on most Americans, to be
Mhm.
honest. Because again, I don't know if they're making a decision based on truth, or they're making a decision about who they perceive as the one that's giving them the truth, right? I think there's a very different side there. I think that's where politics gets me a little frustrated. You hear this bantering back and forth, and it's not rooted in truthful discussion. It's rooted in opinion. And again, I think that's where things kind of get a little wonky. But again, everybody, like, I think the goal of this webcast is to have some differing opinions, to have some real difficult conversations. And I'm really hoping that not only we can bring you some content that you learn from, but that we also learn from. One of the reasons that we wanted to do this Stu and the Gasholes thing, just because it was an awesome name, but was that the where Stewart sits and what he does and the people that he interfaces with are people that are very, very like well respected, and I think that they're very educated in certain aspects of the industry that we can all
Influential.
benefit from hearing from. So, I don't have much more to say. I could talk for 3 hours. You guys have seen us on here before, so I think just going forward, the format's likely going to change. This was just an introductory to get a few little things out there, introduce ourselves, and kind of give you some background on what the show is going to be like. Stuart, I don't know if you have any like wise parting words or some awesome like quote that you've written, or a model your gym clothes.
That's me.
If Stuart, next episode you have to wear your gym clothes.
Yeah, I'll do it. I'll do it on my bike. I'll have
traveling show. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So show you how green I can be riding my bike.
Yeah, it's funny, but it's it's truthful, and I think everybody wants to do their part. It's not just us against them.
Right.
And I think that's the whole entire purpose of what we're trying to accomplish, is to show people that there's some different realities and different truths out there, and different like conversations that need to take place. I'm super interested in hearing about solar and wind and hydro. Like, I don't know anything about that. I think it'd be really cool to get involved and learn more about that. And I think the vast majority of the people that are going to watch this are basically the people that we're connected to, which all lie on the natural gas side of the world. And I'm hoping that they can learn and use the things that they learn here, but also maybe that they already know, and the things that to be able to convey to their children, those different options and different choices. So we can have just a more intellectual generation that's coming up, that's able to speak freely and understand what the real requirements and necessities are to kind of propel forward. So with that being said, boys, I don't know if you have anything else. Yeah, I'm tired. I got exhausted.
Well, on that note, we need others to talk, right? So folks out there, email us, whatever you do. You guys, Chad, Joe, you've done this before, so y'all know what they're supposed to do. But we want this to be interactive. We want this to be engaging. And so, like Joe said, we're tired of talking about natural gas. We want to talk about other stuff. So if y'all have ideas, tell us. Sure. We want this to be a community of just education, sharing thoughts. Let's have a conversation.
Yeah, and even if we wanted to maybe put together, I thought it'd be interesting to do maybe like a round table, get multiple different people on, and be able to have some discussion and allow some. Maybe we can do our own Senate hearing. That you're not invited.
It's a scary thought.
Taker. I was going to be with the little typewriter,
stenographer.
Yeah.
Senator Surratt, that's a scary thought.
Oh, no one wants that. I promise. I can guarantee you a few things. That's never going to happen. It'd be an ugly day in the house if that. But Sue, thank you so much for choosing to do this with us. Chad, thank you for obviously being my best friend and rekindling this. It's been a long year or over a year since we stopped Connections for Life. We thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'm hoping that we can bring some value back to to the industry, and maybe do some collaborative stuff with the people that are already doing.
And if we don't, we'll at least have fun.
Yeah.
It's always fun, right?
Yeah.
It's always fun. So that's it. Anybody want to give a sign off? Chad, go ahead.
No, I'm just trying to think of how I have to do the video. That's all. I'm already waiting for it to download on my computer when I stop, leave the meeting.
Until
It's
next
lunchtime, right?
Until
Can eat
next
lunch.
time. Yeah, lunch, and then you can focus on editing. So.
We should have a good send-off line.
We didn't think about that.
I don't know. Think about it for a week.
All right. Do it again next time.
To infinity and beyond.
Goodbye.
You don't have to go home. You don't have to go home. But you can't stay